Today we're heading into what I would consider one of the prettiest places in the United States, and honestly better than a lot of national parks I've been to. We're headed to Alabama Hills. This area is located in California. It's on the west side of Death Valley National Park, which is probably the most convenient route to get here, and it's on the base of the Eastern Sierra Nevada mountains, right outside of the town of Lone Pine. We're staying in that said town of Lone Pine for about 2 days. We're here in the Eastern Sierras photographing some mountains, sunrises, and sunsets. We visited in mid-February, so it was still pretty cold, but the benefit of this was there was hardly any crowds, especially in the morning. We were the only people in the recreation area. The first morning sunrise wasn't very good. There wasn't much color hitting the mountains, which would have been great because the way the mountains are oriented here, it's better for sunrise than it is for sunset. But we had a few other things to do that day, so we packed up the car and we headed up north to Manzanar Internment Camp, which would be our next stop after we finished up taking some photographs in Alabama Hills. Manzanar is about a 30-minute drive from Lone Pine and definitely worth a stop for anybody coming through the area up the 395 highway. On our way back to Lone Pine, we found some back roads that I'm not entirely sure we were supposed to be driving on, but luckily they connected us directly to Alabama Hills. So on our way through, we were able to stop and take a few more photos before we headed back into Lone Pine to get some dinner before we headed out for sunset. But before that, we headed up the road to Mount Whitney. Mount Whitney is the highest peak in the lower 48, and it's actually accessed right here through Alabama Hills. A funny story, while we were headed up to Mount Whitney, we had about a half a tank of gas in our rental car, and when we got to the top, the road was so steep that the car actually registered that we didn't have any gas, and we were really worried we weren't going to be able to make it back down. We coasted down the hill until the car registered that we actually had gasoline in it again, so take that for some advice if you're visiting the area. And from my understanding, in warmer months, so summer, you could probably see people climbing Mount Whitney. Lone Pine is a cool little mountain town, lots of old and cool trucks throughout the area, and definitely some cool motels that are worth checking out. We just didn't stay at any of these. We headed back into the park for sunset. We headed to this area, which we were at for sunrise also. It's called Movie Row. If you've seen movies such as Iron Man and a lot of old westerns, a lot of these movies were actually filmed in Alabama Hills for its nice western landscapes. Movie Road got its name through that. So we headed back up there to set up for sunset, and this is where I probably got one of my favorite photos that I've ever taken. I really love the snow-capped peaks of the Eastern Sierras with the desert landscape as well as the cactus in the foreground. This definitely made for one of my favorite photos that I've ever taken. After watching the moonrise, we headed back into Lone Pine to get ready for our next day in Alabama Hills. Before we went back to the hotel, though, we stopped in town to check out some of the neon lights on some of the hotels. We got up for sunrise and headed back into Alabama Hills like we did the previous morning, but just like that other morning, the sunrise was a little bit of a bust. We didn't get any good photos. We got some nice photos midday, but we also did this hike to Mobius Arch. In this arch, you can see the Eastern Sierra Nevada mountains through an arch, which is pretty cool and something you would see in somewhere like Arches National Park. The hike is pretty easy, probably about a mile round trip, and you can park right at the trailhead, and we were the only ones on here again, which was definitely really nice. You can see just a few other people while we were there. Before heading out, we made sure to grab a few photos of Mount Whitney, which again is the tallest point in the lower 48, which is really cool because it's only about 50 miles from the lowest point in the lower 48, which is Badwater Basin, which I talked about in a video previously to this. On our way out of town, we checked out some old cars and we headed back towards Death Valley, as that was our route back to Las Vegas. If you watched the previous video, you would have seen that Death Valley had a lot of water while we were there. This resulted in somewhat of a super bloom with some desert flowers popping up throughout the landscape. We made one last quick stop at the sand dunes before we decided to hit a few more spots in Death Valley before heading back to Las Vegas for our next two destinations, which would be the Mojave Desert as well as the Red Rock Conservation Area.